Welcome to another episode of Why Communication Matters. I'm Eugene and I have Pranav with me today. Today we'll be talking about effective strategies that can help brands to build credibility and authenticity in today's digital world. Hi Pranav.
Hi Eugene.
Hi Pranav, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us about some of the challenges that brands face when communicating in today's environment?
Well, the current environment is really, we have the COVID-19 pandemic that's sort of we're at the tail end of it. We hope we're at the tail end of it. But there's this pandemic of disinformation that we're seeing. We really see that, especially online, trust in messages that are being put out by brands, in some cases even by governments, has really decreased in the last few years. And there's a number of studies that track this. So we're operating in this pandemic of disinformation. So against that backdrop, the key things that we really have to focus on and the brands really have to focus on is building trust, building credibility. How do you do that? You have to do that with a very authentic voice. You have to make sure that whatever you're doing is extremely authentic. It's extremely, it's consistent. So we make sure that we are repeating the same messages regularly. And I think the other thing that comes into this is that we are also, or that brands are also using and bringing in user-generated content, because when you have people organically come out and say a similar message that you're aiming to put out about your brand, that's really the test, and that's a testament that your brand really stands for what you say it does. So based on that, and against the backdrop of this pandemic of disinformation, the key thing is really to be authentic, to leverage your user base, and to do things organically. I think those are the most important things that brands have to focus on now.
How can brands build credibility and be authentic with both their stakeholders and the media?
Well, to be honest, that really hasn't changed in the last few hundred years. Building an authentic and a credible voice, the bedrocks and the baselines of PR are still the same, right? You have to make sure you know what your objectives are. You have to make sure you know who your audiences are. And then you have to make sure that, whatever channels you use to reach out to them and whatever messages you have are messages that you can stand by, that you can prove, and that you can justify. So if you're a brand that's, putting out a claim about something, but it ends up being factually incorrect, that's going to have a huge damage and impact on brand reputation. The other thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that you're consistent with your messaging. So if today, you're standing up for a certain cause, and then tomorrow something else happens and the new trend is something else, and you follow that, and and people the internet exists, right? You can go back and see what you said a few months ago, a few years ago. So it's important to make sure that you're consistent over time, right? You have to, if you stand up for something, you have to show that you do that consistently. If you put out certain messages, you have to make sure you repeat them over time and you are consistent with all of that messaging.
What are some platforms that you would recommend for brands to communicate effectively?
Well, this really depends on what the objectives of the brand are, and also where the target audience is that they're trying to reach, like where they're residing. So if you are, a brand that's really looking for young consumers, then it probably makes sense to be on TikTok, to be on Instagram, and to create a lot of content for that. But if you're looking at financial institutions and you're looking at CXOs, then maybe you want to be in more business and financial publications as well. So it really depends on your objectives. That will drive and determine the key mediums and the platforms you have to be on. Having said that, I think there are some platforms that brands have to be on. Social media has become such a big part of our lives. So you have to have a presence on LinkedIn, especially if you're focusing on businesses. You have to have a presence on Facebook. You may have to have a presence on Instagram or on Twitter as well. Having said that, there are a lot of new age, social media platforms there. And a few years ago, if you said that you'd expect, Lawrence Wong to be on TikTok, I don't think a lot of people would have laughed at you, but he's got a TikTok account, and he comes across quite authentically on that. And if you look at Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong as well, the way that he communicates on social media, I believe he started his social media pages about 10 years ago, is excellent. It's very authentic, it's very credible, and he comes across as himself rather than as someone else. So it's really important to make sure that there is some baseline presence on these platforms. I think that's almost like brand hygiene. And then, the platforms that you should spend more time and effort on really depend on who your target audiences are.
What are some best practices for brands to communicate effectively?
Well, I think this goes back to the basics of PR, and kind of mentioned a little bit of this earlier. Know what your objectives are, know who your audiences are, know what platforms they're on, and determine what you want to say to them on those platforms. So once you have those in play, then it's really about creating an execution strategy to go out and target those messages to those different audiences. Having said that, I think the other key thing is that you have to make sure that you're not just following the latest buzzword. You're staying true to your brand and true to the communications and things that matter to your brand, and you're not just moving messages every few weeks because there's a new trend that's come up or there's something else that you're trying to jump onto. So consistency is very key. That's a big part of building trust and credibility.
Can you share an example of a brand that has been either authentic or has communicated effectively in its messaging?
Well, I think there's a couple of brands that come to mind. One brand especially, during the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of people lost their jobs and were laid off. We've seen a number of brands communicate layoffs in very different ways. Some people were really, I think in some cases CEOs had to step aside or resign because of the way that they handle layoffs. But if you look at how Airbnb communicated their layoffs to their team, I think it was done exceptionally. It's a very hard situation, but they did it with empathy. They did it with being sort of honest and clear about why they have to do this. And they followed that up. They followed up the statement saying that, we care about employees by giving them relatively large severance packages and all the support they needed to move on and find new jobs as well. So that's really important, right? That shows that, firstly, they understand the situation their employees are going through. They understand how tough it's going to be on them to lose their job and to look for other jobs during a pandemic. And then they are, proving that they understand it by supporting them financially as well. So I think they really hit sort of the whole package. Other brands that I think have done a really good job include Emirates, who are actually one of our clients. Again, COVID-19 pandemic was very hard for them, for airlines. A lot of flights and tourism stopped essentially. But despite that, they really communicated well across all markets throughout the entire pandemic. I feel like their communications were very authentic. They showed, the hardships they were going through, but they also showed, this future that we were hoping for, where travel would resume, and they had a little bit of a playful side to it as well. So I think they did a really good job throughout the last couple of years too. Another thing that's really important is employee engagement, and I feel like that gets missed out a lot when we're talking about communication strategies. I've said many times before that people are an extremely important part of any business. In fact, it's probably the most important part, because without people, you don't have a business, right? So the last couple of years, we've seen trends like the Great Resignation. We've seen a lot of people move jobs because they're offered other perks, or they're offered better benefits. So it's really important to ensure that brands are communicating to their teams and to their people. They're outlining their brand strategy, they're outlining what they want to try and achieve, and they outline the progression for employees as well. I think that's a big part that we tend to miss out, and brands tend to miss out. And we've seen that, become a big problem, especially in the last couple of years.
We hope you found the insights from today's conversations to be valuable. I would love to hear from you if you have any questions about today's topic. Do check out our other videos, and we'll see you next time. Bye!